I hate myself. I'm the worst player on planet Earth. I absolutely suck. I mean, I cannot win a game if my life depended on it. These are all the things that I've actually said to myself when I've played a match. Does this sound familiar to you at all? And it's kind of weird because it's almost cathartic, and in some sick and twisted way, it actually feels good to do this. But it is the fastest and surest way to lose a tennis match. And luckily for us, today we have Andy Gerst to talk us off the ledge and teach us how we can play, calm, cool, collected tennis, even when we're down, 5-0, 40 love. We saw how powerful the mind can work for us and not against us at this year's US Open when Rafael Nadal was down 6-0. He won 7 points in that first set, and then he got up out of his chair and walked off confidently to play tennis. So, Andy, thank you so much for coming on today. And what are you going to be helping us with today?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Peter. Very excited to be a part of your great event. Today, I want to talk about a topic that's picked up a little bit of mainstream momentum, and it's a topic that's very important to me. But we're going to talk about mindfulness and the ability to take the principles that are a part of mindfulness and bring it onto the tennis court. And just like what you said, you were just talking about Rafa, and I love that. And mindfulness is all about being in the present moment and being completely focused on the task at hand. And it's easy when you lose a set 6-0, your mind can start racing. Your mind can go in a million different places, and it can start telling you that you suck and that you're the worst tennis player ever. And what Rafa did was he just kind of took a deep breath, focused in, and got right back to the present moment and got right back on task. So I love that. I love that intro. So we're going to dive into mindfulness a little bit, the principles that make up mindfulness and that you can apply to your tennis game.
That's awesome. Now, before we start listening to Andy, I want to tell you why you guys should listen to him. First of all, I'm very impressed with this guy. He was you tested products for Tennis Warehouse, right?
I did. Yeah, it was our department was in charge of becoming product experts on everything tennis: rackets, strings, shoes, accessories, even some different items. So became an expert testing all different kinds of products there, and we did all the product descriptions and reviews and video reviews that some of you may watched online. Kind of a tennis nerd's dream job. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, so I started watching your videos there. So he's a product expert and coach. He gave some great tennis tips, and then through watching him do that, I thought, wow, this guy is a really good coach and an awesome tennis player. And I come to find out that you were almost coaching Bethany Maddox-Sands a couple months ago. Isn't that right? Or was it a year ago?
It was a year ago. Yeah, I appreciate the kind words, Peter. Yeah, I actually decided to leave Tennis Warehouse to get back to what I've kind of realized is a passion and kind of a calling for me, which is coaching full time, just like you do. And yeah, it turned out, actually, crazy coincidence, my last day at Tennis Warehouse was the day that Bethany had that knee injury at Wimbledon last year. And that's what I was kind of leaving to do. I was going to meet up with her after that tournament and travel with her the rest of the year. But to make a long story short, things ended up working out. I had a nice little stint over that same summer with her doubles partner, Lucy Safarova. But now I've kind of settled into a great club down here in the Los Angeles area, and still, and also I'm working with a player on the WTA tour. Her name is Danielle Lau. Right now she's right around 220 in the world, and she just went through qualifying and made it into the first round of the US Open. So we're real excited about that. So yeah, real excited to be back coaching full time.
Yeah, that is awesome. And besides that, the guy makes shirts. Look, I'm wearing his shirt. His company's called Animus, and I love them. I'm normally not somebody who says, "Oh, the shirt feels so comfortable," and this. And I really don't even pay attention to that stuff. But he sent me the shirt and said, "Wait till you feel the shirt. It actually feels really good on your body," and it actually does. So, good job on that too.
Thank you. Yeah, once you start wearing the bamboo organic cotton blend, it's tough to go back. So.
I agree. I want more shirts. Anyway, walk us through what we're going to be learning today.
Perfect. Well, again, kind of like what I previously said, we're gonna be talking about mindfulness and how it applies to your tennis game. So let's go into a little brief presentation that I've I've set up here. Okay, so we're going to be talking about 3 tips to help you play mindful tennis. But first, I think the most important thing to ask is what is mindfulness? And kind of like what I mentioned previously, it's the practice of bringing one's attention and focus to whatever is happening in the present moment, right? And just like Peter talked about in that intro, which I loved, Rafa got out of his own head, got out of worrying about what Dominic Thiem was, how he was dominating him on the court, took a deep breath, focused, and just came right back to that present moment. And part of being really present and focused is being fully aware of the feelings and sensations that are going on in your head at the time, right? So it's, what could be going through his head? Well, what's going on today? I just lost a set 6-0, right? I'm getting dominated. He's got 15,000 plus people in the stands watching him lose 6-0. That can be a real big hit to the ego, right? Does he begin to doubt himself? Is he beginning to kind of elevate Dominic Thiem in his eyes, right? He's, all these different feelings and sensations and judgments are going on in your head. And just being fully aware of those things is really, really important. But it's a simple idea, right? And it's obviously much, much easier said than done. So why can't we be mindful all the time, right? Our minds are constantly being drawn in different directions, right? I'm just going to kind of challenge you guys here to just sit and let's just kind of try to be completely present. Let's try to focus on your breath, right? For a couple seconds here. Right? And what you'll find is you'll probably take a breath or two and then you're going to wonder when's Andy going to keep moving on with the presentation, right? Maybe you're worried about some task that you have to do in the future or something that happened in the past, right? Our minds are constantly being drawn to different things, and that's totally normal, right? Mindfulness isn't about controlling the mind. That's a really big, I think, misconception when we talk about this kind of stuff. When we think about, okay, we want to be fully present, we want to be fully right here. It's not about controlling and constricting the mind and bringing it right back. It's more about just kind of softening the mind, right? And realizing that all these things, all these thoughts, all these feelings, all these judgments are totally normal. They're totally natural. And just being aware of that tendency is one of the most basic principles of mindfulness. It's almost kind of taking a step back, viewing it from a third-party perspective. That's really, really important. So if I'm trying to focus on my breath here, and I find myself being drawn to, hey, maybe I'm feeling a little bit self-conscious that you're just watching me on camera breathe, right? That might be the first thought that comes into my head. Instead of trying to put that thought out, right, and try to block it out of my mind, just kind of being aware of that thought, letting it pass, and then just coming back to that present moment. So that's kind of the key. That's one of the most basic principles of mindfulness that's really, really important. And as we kind of build into what it means to play mindful tennis, there are 3 key principles that I think are very important about mindfulness and how it can be applied to tennis. And I want to take a couple minutes here. I don't want to take all the credit because I'm definitely kind of repackaging a lot of this stuff. And if any of you guys have read The Inner Game of Tennis, I highly recommend that. That was a book that was written, over 40 years ago now, I believe. And it's still completely relevant and very, very important. And a lot of this stuff is kind of drawing from that. And also, when I'm talking about the 3 principles of mindful tennis, I'm drawing off of a definition of the principles of mindfulness that John Kabat-Zinn, who is kind of considered one of the fathers of Western, mindfulness practice in general, not having to do with sports, he kind of defined the principles of mindfulness. And so this is kind of borrowed and manipulated a little bit from him. So I want to definitely I want to cite those 2 sources and give credit where it's due. Moving in here, the 3 principles that I believe of mindful tennis are acceptance, non-judgment, and relaxed concentration. And relaxed concentration kind of builds off of the first 2. And so we'll kind of dive right into that here. So the first thing I want to talk about here is acceptance. And again, kind of a softening of the mind, right? Acceptance of your game, acceptance of the conditions, acceptance of your opponent, acceptance of maybe a tough tournament schedule that you may be faced with. And we're talking about here things that are out of your control and not wanting to control them. Right? When our ego gets involved and we try to control the things around us, that's when we really start to fight ourselves, right? And that's when a lot of tension starts to build. And acceptance of wherever your game is at in that present moment, acceptance of everything going on around you is a very, very key to mindfulness. And you'll find that your body just kind of, and your mind just kind of softens when you start to build that into your game. So one analogy that I really like that was brought up in the inner game of tennis is you don't want to look at your game like, let's say you're going to a tennis lesson, right? You've got a coach, and you don't want to be going to your tennis lesson like a sick patient. You've judged that something is wrong in your game and you need to fix it, right? And instead, you want to be kind of going as a regular checkup, right? Your game is what it is. Nothing needs to be fixed. You don't need to assign a good or bad value. Once you assign a good or bad value to something, I'm playing poorly, I'm playing well, my opponent is really good, my opponent is really bad, all this kind of stuff, that takes you down a path that you don't want to go to. So instead of looking at your game like a sick patient, take it for what it is and just go in and check up, right? See how it feels that day, maybe look at it and just kind of feel where you're at. And then you can make improvements there. So
can I just ask you a question for a second? Sorry to interrupt you, but it kind of interests me. Yeah. I think this is really good, and I hate to put you on the spot because it is a tough question.
That's what you're there for, Peter.
Yeah. What if you're going for these checkups, like you said, and you're trying not to judge your game, but let's just say you really hate like your backhand, like. And you just take it so personal. Like, how do you get yourself out of that? How do you look at like having part of your game that's nowhere near where you want it to be or believe it could get to? And how do you like accept it, but still work on getting it better? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And that's going to get into the non-judgment side, which is actually what we're going to get into next. But realizing that when you assign something, anytime we assign something a good or a bad value, right? You hate your backhand, right? You take something that, it's personal, right? That invokes the ego, right? And once the ego gets involved, if you're trying to play mindful tennis, now that's leading you down a path that you don't want to go to. And I think it's important to realize that there's a difference between wanting to improve your backhand and wanting to get it better, and thinking that your backhand sucks, right? And thinking that your backhand is bad, right? You can still be striving for excellence and striving for improvement without having to assign a good or bad value to that stroke or to your game, right? You can view your backhand for what it is. Even if you think your backhand sucks, there might still be some elements to it that a coach can look at and go, oh, well, hey, maybe you're not leaning into it and transferring your weight forward as best as you could, but you still got a great early take back and your racket's in the right spot, and there's things you can build off of, right? And the assigning a good or bad value to something is it's simply it's an unneeded added step, and all it does is, in my opinion, make the problem worse, right? There's no use for calling something good or bad. Just like there's no use for going into a tournament and calling I've got an easy first round and then a tough second round, right? That's not the way we want to approach something. You want to try to approach every match the same, just like you want to approach every stroke the same if possible. And I think that's something too. This is something that I've worked on a lot with Danielle, the girl that I'm working on, is it's our natural tendency, like you say, if you judge something as a weakness, if you judge a stroke as bad, as soon as it starts to go wrong in a match, you're gonna have the tendency to get more emotional about it than you would if another part of your game goes awry, right? If I'm, let's take me for example. I've always considered my serve, I can if I'm gonna judge, I can serve well, but it can also go off, right? So my serve is what it is, but I found that I have a tendency in the past, if I'm playing and I start to miss a couple serves, now I'm going to start to get a little bit emotional about my serve and start to second guess my serve simply because I've had the tendency to judge it in the past. Whereas, let's say I'm returning serve, and I consider my return to serve one of my strengths in my game. That's where I can do a lot of damage. If I miss a couple returns in a match early on, I'm just going to go, okay, I'm going to keep swinging, and I'm going to find it, right? And I'm not going to let that I'm not going to get emotional over it and let it permeate into other areas of the game. So I kind of gave you a long answer there, and I hope I didn't get too long-winded, but I think that's how you can approach that problem is instead of assigning a bad value to a stroke, just simply say, well, this is something that I want to get better.
Yeah,
right?
I think that's a great answer, and I appreciate it, because a lot of times when I'm teaching a lesson, let's say someone doesn't like their backhand, well, let's stay with the backhand. Usually it's one little thing they're doing wrong, and all the other stuff is fine. But since they missed the shot, they just view like this big X, like everything's bad about it because I missed it. And if you're just really observing it objectively and not judging, like you say, usually I think you can have more of a clear mind and say, oh, well, yeah, well, Pete's told me this before, Annie's told me this before. When the ball goes in the net, I'm just not, getting my hands under the ball or something like that. And if I do that, everything's going to be fine. My backhand is not the worst backhand in the world. It's this one little habit that I tend to do, and when my ball starts to go in the net, and I can easily fix that. And rather than just hit the panic button and freak out and just, go right into, there I go again. I hit everything in the net and my backhand stinks, so great answer there.
No, exactly. And just to kind of build on what you just said too, I love how you mentioned that when you can kind of take the judgment out of that, now you can look at it objectively, right? And now you're much more perceptive of something. Whereas in the past, if you've been judging yourself and you get emotional about a particular stroke, that's all clouding the learning process. That's all clouding your mind. That's making things more difficult. And like you said, you become more clear-headed. You become more able to take that instruction, and then you're more perceptive if you make that change or if you don't. And so we'll get into mindful learning a little bit later in this presentation as well. But that's a very, very, that's basically exactly it, is just being able to observe it objectively as opposed to really judging yourself and getting emotional over mistakes. So that was a great question, Peter. I appreciate that. And just kind of build one more thing here with acceptance. And this is another thing that I think is really important for players, is acceptance whenever you're in a pressure or in a big moment, right? So, and it's another opportunity. Acceptance has to do with trying to control, or obviously being accepting of the situation. So when let's say we get into 6-5 in the third set, right? And we start to feel ourselves get really nervous. Right? When those nerves come in, a lot of times that's a tendency for our minds to go in either direction. You're either worried about, oh crap, I don't want to mess up. My shots haven't quite been executing the way I want it. This is a great opportunity, and I hope I don't mess this up. Or you can go in the future and say, oh, this could be a great win, or this would be a bad loss, right? Your mind's going in different directions, which again is totally normal. If you can soften there, and again, come back to your breath and just really trust your game and commit to a way that you want to play that point. And then you can become much more accepting in that pressure moment. So what I like to suggest is, let's say it's 6-5 in the third, you're sitting down at that side change, and you can really feel your body start to constrict and your heart rate starting to rise, right? Become very aware of that. Become hyper aware of that. Really feel where you're holding that tension in your body, right? If you kind of sit there and close your eyes and take a deep breath, you can kind of feel where that tension is in your body, right? And you kind of come back to the present moment and you say, okay, it's crunch time. I'm going to play my best tennis, right? I'm going to play Peter tennis, right? And if you commit to playing the way that you want to play, the results are out of your control. What happens, happens. You can't control what happens on the other side of the net. You can only control yours. Just commit to playing what you want to do, and the rest will take care of itself, and trust your game. And I think that really helps relieve a lot of that pressure and helps you practice acceptance in that moment. So that's kind of another element there of acceptance that I really kind of wanted to emphasize. Moving into the second principle of mindful tennis is non-judgment, which we just kind of touched on a little bit. So I'll move through it a little bit quicker here. And it has to do with what I like to call observing and assessing, right? As opposed to assigning a good or a bad value to something. So just like what you mentioned, Peter, if you're trying to improve your backhand, hit the backhand and kind of see what's happening. Are you missing it in the net? Are you missing it long, right? What's your tendency there? Maybe if you're working with a coach, they're asking you to, if you're missing the ball in the net and they're saying, well, you need to get lower, you need to get underneath the ball. Maybe observe where your racket is, right before the point of contact. Are you really getting that drop below the ball? Observe where your legs are, and if you're dropping below the ball with your legs and your hips, right? Just observing for what it is, and not like you mentioned, Peter, not saying, oh, my backhand is bad today, right? Or my backhand sucks. Right, that's not a necessary step in the learning process, and actually it hurts it because it makes us it invokes the ego, and it also makes us try to take more control over something. And so that's a very, very important thing. And then again, we touched on this a little bit, but another principle of non-judgment, and I see this a lot in so many juniors, and as adults too, we do this too, is we'll go into a tournament and we're instantly judging the player that we play, right? If you know the person that you're going to play beforehand, maybe you're going, oh, well, this is an easier first round, and then I've got a tough second round, right? Or maybe you don't know who you're playing, and you step out there and you start to, and you're like, okay, well, let's see where they're at in the warm up, and you look at their strokes and you go, oh gosh, this person's terrible, right? I should beat them. Now you're judging. Right now you're judging the other person, you're judging your opponent, and again, this does nothing to help you win out on court. It only hurts you because you're setting yourself up in one of two areas. You're either going to look at the opponent and think you can beat them, and let's say that you're not executing the way that you like, and they come out on fire, and now all of a sudden you're in a situation you're down against a player that you think is bad. How's that going to affect your mentality? Right? Now you're going to start thinking you're worse, right? The more you judge outside, the more you're going to judge inward. So now you're going to be judging yourself. Now you're going to be getting really frustrated, right? Or the opposite. Let's say you're playing one of the top seeds in the tournament. You go, oh, my opponent's really, really good today. Now maybe let's say you come out, your expectations are low, and you're playing free, and you're right there with them. Right? And then it gets into crunch time, and all of a sudden now you've judged them ahead of time. Lots of thoughts start to creep in, and now you're thinking, oh, well, this could be a great win because this player is really good, all this kind of stuff. Again, now that set you up for a lot more tension in a pressure moment, and it doesn't help us win out on court. So one of the things I love from the great Dr. Alan Fox is he has his golden rule of tennis. If it doesn't help you win on court, don't do it. Right? And that on all those judgments about your strokes, judgments about player, judgments about the tournament or the conditions, all that stuff doesn't help you win. So don't do it. Let's try to practice non-judgment when you're out there, and more observing and assessing and creating more of an objective mindset when you're out on court.
That is really, really good. I mean, I'm 45 now. So, I mean, you really, I swear you brought me back to junior. I was a good junior tennis, college tennis. But I mean, you brought me back to some. If I could have had this when I was playing, if I could have heard it and applied it, I mean, that's the key. Which, like you said, is harder, easier said than done. But I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been in a match, and like you said, you're out there in the warm up, and you're just so curious to see how they're going to hit the ball, and then you basically make up a score in your mind, like, okay, today I should win 6-3, 6-2, and so not only are you like thinking if you're going to win or lose, you start to put a score on the match, and then all of a sudden if all of a sudden it's 4-all or something like that, now even before 4-all happens, you start panicking. It looks like it's 2-all. You're like, uh-oh, I don't know if I'm going to win 6-3, 6-2 like I had in my mind, and then like you literally start panicking, and then you start freaking out, and then you start getting so mad at yourself. And then every time your opponent hits a good shot, then you start going, I hate them. They're so freaking lucky. I mean, it's incredible the things that start racing through our mind. And you totally brought me into a flashback, like Vietnam flashback there. So that's pretty good.
Well, good, Peter. But yeah, I mean, and I think, like you touched on, this is much easier said than done, right? And the actual practice of this, these are all habits of mind that we want to try to break, right? And they're all natural, and they're all things that we all do. I'm sitting here sharing this stuff, and I'm guilty of this stuff almost every day that I step out on the court. It's a completely natural thing. And the most important part, if you guys can take anything away from this and start to apply this to your game, is just really start being aware of it when it happens, and kind of viewing it as a third party, right? One of the I didn't include this in my slides, but one of the key principles of mindfulness is not attaching to any thoughts or feelings like they control you and like they own you, right? All those thoughts and all those feelings that arise, not just on the tennis court, but from, driving your car on the freeway, right? Any sort of frustrations that arise or all that kind of things, those all pass, those all come and go. And if you're not practicing mindfulness, and if you're not aware of the fact that you might not have control over those thoughts, but you do have control over what you decide to attach to or not, right? And if you can start to view those from a third-party kind of viewpoint and just watch them go and let them pass. One of the analogies that I really like, meditation is a big part of my life, and one of the analogies that I really like from one of the teachers that I listen to is, he goes, you want to imagine yourself like you're standing on the side of the road watching cars go by, right? And the cars symbolize your thoughts and your feelings, and our natural position is to be standing right in the middle of the road, right? And to really kind of be rattled by all these cars flying by us on both sides, and really, really getting absorbed in where you're at. And what you want to be able to do is stand on the side of the road and watch those cars pass by, from a third-party perspective. And that really, really helps to create that space in your mind, and that relaxed concentration as we build into the third principle of mindfulness, to practice that. That's a really important thing. And that has to do with, again, softening and not trying to control it, understanding that those things are natural and those things happen. When you go out on court and you judge your opponent, that's a totally natural thing to do. Don't judge yourself and chastise yourself when you start to do that, right? Just simply be aware of it and take a deep breath and get right back on task. And that's really, really an important part of this that I hope everyone can take away. And one last thing here, talking about concentration, just a really quick little blip that I really like, again, from Inner Game of Tennis. He talks about how concentration is fascination of the mind, right? When we become fascinated with whatever we're doing, again, this can apply. You think about a time during the day or during the last week where time has flown by, and you not even realizing that you're just totally immersed in something that you're doing, right? You're completely focused and time is passing by. You're fascinated with whatever you're doing, right? And taking that to the tennis court, if you can go out and start your warm up and just become fascinated by all the feelings and sensations and everything that makes up tennis, right? Just starting with the warm up and short court, and just feeling the ball and the strings and what it feels like to get in perfect position to hit all your shots, and then stepping back, and just the sensations of the speed of the game, the physicality of the game, the intricacies of all the tactics and the strategies and all the things that make up your strokes. That's a fascination with the game of tennis. And when I'm loving tennis, and when I'm really enjoying myself out there, and when I'm really viewing my game objectively and really being mindful, I'm fascinated with my game and the game of tennis as a whole. So I just like that little blip. You can kind of take that, and if it works for you, great. And if not, don't worry about it. I just thought it was thought it was really useful, thinking that concentration and that relaxed concentration is a fascination of the mind. So with that said, how do we apply these mindful principles when we step on the court? It's much easier said than done. It's much easier to talk about how do we take it to the court. And there are two very important aspects of it, and simple aspects, that I think that we can start to implement from day one, and that can help you be more mindful on the court. And the first is using your breath. Your breath is an incredibly good tool to help you stay in the present moment. It connects you with the now. It connects you with the world around you. And talking about fascination of the mind, if you can fascinate yourself with just the sensations of your breath out on court, right? When you take a deep breath, kind of feel the air coming in, feel how your body expands. And then we talk about softening the mind. When you exhale, think about how your body softens, or feel how your body softens with a good exhale, right? And when you start to find your mind drifting into these different areas on court, whether it's judgment, whether it's thoughts about the past or the future, or getting emotional about a particular thought, you can use your breath as an anchor for your game. You can always come back to the breath and use that to help you become present again in that moment and get right back on task. So getting a really good deep breath before and after a point, before and after a rally, right? We're going to talk about we're going to step on court in a minute here and talk about some between point rituals, using the breath as an anchor for your game, as a kind of a cue to be more mindful on court. That's a very, very important part. And the second part of this is rituals and routines. And again, I'm sure you've heard this. If you've worked on the mental side of your game, I'm sure you've heard this before. But whenever we invoke a ritual, something that our body is used to doing every single time on court, whether it's bouncing the ball a few times before we serve, or I like to blink a few times right before I return so that I don't have to blink when the ball's coming over to me. That's a good little quick tip as well. Any sort of rituals or routines that you do on court help ground you in the present moment, help bring you back to the here and now, help take you away from any sorts of judgments or past or future thoughts, and help you get back to the task at hand. So those are two very simple but very important aspects and very, very important things that we can bring right away from day one to help us be more mindful on the court. So unless you have any questions, Peter, or anything we want to explore, let's go ahead and hit the courts and see how we can start to apply these in both drilling and point scenarios.
Okay, cool. I can't wait to watch you play some tennis.
So we're out here on court, and we're going to work on applying the mindfulness principles that we already talked about now on court. And I want to emphasize two things. And the first, we're going to get back just simply to the definition of mindfulness, which is being fully present and aware in the present moment. And like we talked, it's completely natural that our minds are going to go elsewhere, or we might find ourselves judging, right? We might be warming up and we'll say, I'm not hitting the forehand the way I want. I'm playing bad today, right? We don't want to think about trying to control our minds. That just creates more tension. Simply being aware of it when it happens is an essential part of mindfulness. So as you're hitting it, if you're hitting one and you go, that was a bad backhand, right? Just catching yourself in that moment and just taking a little step back, almost observing it as a third party. That's the key right there. Not necessarily stopping those thoughts, just being aware from them. And then bringing me to my second point is using your breath as an anchor for your game. So when you catch yourself doing that, use your breath to center yourself. Take a deep breath and kind of just feel what it does to your body, feel it soften, and then come right back on task into the present moment. So we're just gonna start warming up here, real basic. We're not doing anything, any specific drill. We're just gonna hit, and I'm gonna kind of just be observing how my game is going and how I'm hitting. Again, not judging, not saying, I'm hitting well today, I'm hitting poorly today. Just kind of feeling it out and just seeing what we're doing here. So let's hit a few balls and warm it up. kind of feeling out how are my legs and my feet moving today? Am I making contact with the ball where I want? Good. So I observe there that my mind is thinking about making this video, right? And just being aware of that fact is one thing that I'm trying to work and be mindful on, right? I also noticed too in the warm-up there, I'd like to move my feet a little bit faster, right? Just making observations and assessments of what are going on as opposed to judging and saying, I'm not hitting my backhand well today, right? So we'll go in one more ball here. I'm observing now. Now I'm gonna maybe make the adjustment and say, okay, I wanna feel a little lighter and faster on my feet, right? Maybe get my racket back a little bit quicker. So we'll get right back into it here. Just one more ball. So again, observing and assessing, that's a key part of the learning process as opposed to the judgment side, which is not necessary when we're learning. Observe, assess, and then go ahead and just let it happen. Next video, we're gonna take this same kind of purposeful mindfulness into a drill. So now we're gonna work in trying to be mindful, now just doing a basic drill. And this is a drill that I call Crazy Forehands. It's named after a college teammate of mine. Very simple. All I'm going to be doing is just aiming for, it's basically an isolation. So my partner is in a corner and I'm going to be aiming for a target in the corner. And I'm going to be running around looking for my forehand, trying to hit every ball as a forehand aggressively into that target zone. And again, I want to pay close attention here and really emphasize the mindful learning process. So I mentioned in the warm-up, the observation and the assessment, which is really important, right? So as you're working out here on court and you're doing drills or you're playing points, as opposed to the judgment, what you want to be doing is just observing your game, right? Observe it, see how it feels. Then when the drill is over, the point is over, then you can assess, right? You can break it down and you could say, okay, well, I'd like to be hitting the ball maybe a little bit earlier, right? I'd like to feel a little lighter and faster on my feet, whatever it is, whatever assessment that you make. Then there's the programming stage, right? Give yourself a very simple, very concise image or feeling that you want to convey the next point or the next rally, right? And we want to remember images and feelings always work better than words. So let's say, for example, actually let's go right into this drill. So for me, I have the tendency to get my contact point a little too far behind me on the forehand and I can be leaning backwards, right? So instead of telling myself, I want to get my contact in front, right? Or I want to try to be getting my weight going forward. That's all good, but those are words. Instead, I want to have an image, right? So instead of that, I can just kind of picture Roger Federer hitting his forehand, right? And when I do that, I have this image of him way out in front, leaning in, taking the ball early, right? So maybe I'm going to have that image as I'm doing the drill, right? Maybe the feeling of really reaching out for that ball and just feeling where I want to make that contact point, right? So give yourself a very simple image or feeling. That's the programming stage, and then we're going to let it happen, right? We're not going to be tense and try to do it on every ball. Trust your body, right? If you give yourself that simple image or feeling, you're probably going to execute it okay, and then the process starts over, and then you can kind of observe and see how it goes and see if you need to change anything else. So we're going to work into this drill here. And I'm going to be looking Roger Federer forehands out in front, leaning forward, and we'll see how it goes. okay. Heads up. One last ball here. Ah. Okay, so as I catch my breath here, I thought as I worked into that drill, I was achieving my goal of hitting my Roger Federer forehands and getting him to that target more frequently. One observation I can make is I got a little fatigued during that drill, so I'd like to maybe work this drill a little bit more into my everyday routine so I can build that fitness level. And I noticed one thing that really helped me kind of settle into that drill was kind of a softening of the mind. So I started the drill and I was a little bit tense. I was kind of trying to make, maybe for the video here, I was trying to make sure I got everyone just right. And instead, kind of as I was working into it, I came back to my breath, right? Felt the inhale, felt the soften on the exhale. That allowed me to kind of settle in and trust the body a little bit more. So that's kind of the mindfulness principles applied to drilling. Now I can kind of go back, make whatever adjustments I need and go back to the drill, but now we're gonna work into some points. Now we're gonna play a few points applying what we've already learned. And again, just to review, remembering that the breath is a great anchor. It's a great centering for your body and your mind. And you can pay real close attention to the inhale, feel your body soften on the exhale, and that's a great way to kind of stay present and mindful in the moment, right? And the second thing is that mindful learning process, being aware simply of just if you're being judgmental or emotional out on court, and just observing how you're feeling out there, right? What's going on in a match, right? What's working and what's not. You don't have to tell yourself that you're bad at tennis, the other person's bad at tennis or good at tennis, right? You can just say, okay, I'm winning more points when I play this way, right? Oh, this shot I seem to be dropping short and they're taking advantage. And that's just an observation. And then you assess, and then you program, and then you let it happen. So now we're gonna build into some points. And a nice thing to remember when you're playing points, when you want to apply that mindful learning, is what I like to call the 4 R's, right? The 4 R's. And you can do this between points in a match. And the first R is gonna be your release. So you're gonna play your point, and that's where you're gonna take your first deep breath. You play the point, play the point, play the point, and then come back to your breath right there. Again, paying close attention to the inhale and the exhale. Then you go into your assessment period, right? You're analyzing what went on without judgment. Okay, this worked. This helped me be successful. This might have hurt me in the point, right? This is a tactic that might be winning me some points, those type of things. So that's the review process. That's the second R. Then the third one is the reset, what I like to call, and that's going to be your second deep breath. That's again, so you've kind of reviewed it. You've given yourself a nice simple plan for the point. Now you're resetting, getting ready to step up to the line to serve a return. And then the fourth one is your ritual. And the ritual is another very key component to helping you stay centered and focused in the moment. Your body and your mind kind of align when you start to do a very familiar process to yourself. So bouncing the ball before you serve. Maybe I like to actually blink my eyes a few times before the return so that I don't have to blink as the ball's coming over to me. So those are the kind of rituals I have in points. So we're going to work that in right now. We're going to play some points just for the sake of video and so we can get some good rallies. We're just going to feed out of the hand, but all of these principles can be applied obviously when you're serving and returning. So I'm going to play points here with Kai. We're going to do 2 cross courts to start the point, and then after that anything goes, and then between the point I'm going to work that 4R process, the release, the review, the reset, and the ritual. Okay? on there. I felt like I'm dropping the ball a little bit short, so I just want to make sure I'm getting that good length on my shots, getting my feet under me. And again, remembering you're not always going to be successful out there, right? I dropped another ball short. That's okay. I had better intention in that point. Just continuing to observe, assess, program myself with a clear, simple plan, and then let it happen. A couple more points here, and I'm just trying to call to mind right now. I feel like my shots kind of lack a little bit of purpose. Just kind of reminding myself my simple game plan, which I'm not going to reveal to you guys in case I see any of you guys in a tournament. Might be able to figure it out. Play it. Okay, we'll call it right there. So that's mindfulness applied to the point scenarios, remembering the 4 R's, which we'll review again. We'll take it back inside with Peter.
So Andy, that was really, really fun watching you play on court. As I've told the people out there before, you are an outstanding player. And one of the things that I've been thinking about as you've been presenting today is that this is a skill that's going to take time, just like developing a kick serve or a slice serve or a toss-in forehand. Things that you knew before you started are going to take time, and you want to be patient and you want to enjoy the process. Where I think when it comes to the mental side, we're always looking for, just give me one quick tip that will make me play great, and I don't really want to work on it. I just want to hit winners all day. And so I think that this is super important that people realize this is something that the more you enjoy the process of doing all this, and every time you have a win, just like when you hit your first kick serve and you couldn't believe it happened, you have to kind of celebrate that. So wrap this all up for us.
Yeah, I love that. I couldn't put it any better myself, Peter. That's awesome. This is just like this is just like a forehand. This is just like a backhand, where this takes a lot of time and a lot of practice. And I think it's important too, to not invoke judgment, right? Don't get out on court and, like you said, expect to get it right away. Beat yourself up about it if you don't have it right away. You are where you are with this, right? If you can catch yourself once on the first day, right? Maybe you can catch yourself twice on the second day. Maybe you can catch yourself 5 times on the next day. So you are where you are with it. Enjoy the process. I love how you put that, Peter. That was really great. So we'll wrap this up here. Just to kind of get back to 2 key principles that we talked about on court. The first of which is the mindful learning process, right? As opposed to maybe a more, a more habitual learning process that we've gotten into where we're judging and we're worried about getting it, or something's wrong or something's good or bad, right? The mindful learning process starts with simply observing for what it is. So we talked about this earlier, observing, hit your strokes, observe what's going on, right? If you're working with a coach, maybe just simply be, a little bit more aware of where your racket's at during the process, or where your weight's transferring, right? Observe what your stroke is doing. Are you missing in the net? Are you missing long? Are you missing wide? All this kind of stuff. Just observing what's going on. Once you do that, then you can kind of take a step back and do the assessment process, right? Maybe you want to make the adjustment. I love a lot of times when we're missing in the net, we're trying to, invoke all these really technical things to, I want to get lower, I want to drop my racket, all this stuff. Maybe it's just simply aim higher, right? If you want to miss less in the net, aim 3 feet higher over the net and see if that fixes the problem right away. You may find that just giving yourself a simple feeling, a simple thought, will take care of a lot of the technical stuff that we're constantly worried about. It might take care of 5 different things. I remember I was working last week. I had a lesson with a junior of mine, and we were working on his backhand, and I was trying to get him to doing something, and he was getting it and not quite getting it and all this kind of stuff. And then I went and grabbed a medicine ball, and we threw the medicine ball back and forth. And then all of a sudden he got it, and he goes, "Wow, I just needed that feeling." He's like, "I didn't know what the feeling was." Right? And a feeling and an image always works a little better than words, kind of like what I talked about on court, right? And so just give yourself a simple feeling for what you want and see if that maybe fixes the ball. So you're kind of reprogramming yourself during that assessment process. So you observe, you program, and then you just let it happen. Trust your body. Give yourself a very clear intention to what you want to do in the next drill, and see if it works, right? And that's the kind of the bonus last step, is just then you start the process over. Observe again, right? Did your reprogramming work? Did it not, right? You don't have to say whether it was good or bad. Did it help you achieve the goals that you wanted to achieve in that drill? Did it help you win a few more points than you won, in the previous 2 games, whatever it is? So that's kind of the mindful learning process. 3 steps: observe, program, and let it happen. So that was the first thing that I wanted to touch on there. Secondly, once we worked into the point situations, I wanted to kind of review the between point ritual, the 4 R's, right? And again, this is, something borrowed and tweaked. This is definitely not my original idea. I'm sure some of you have heard variations of this before. But I like the 4 R's, the first R being a release. Right? And that's a good opportunity there to use your breath as an anchor for your game. So you play a long point, or you're doing a drill, right? And the first step is to give yourself that third person perspective. And the best way to do that, focus on your breath, take a great inhale and a great exhale, and just feel yourself soften, feel the body soften, feel the mind soften, and then get ready to review whatever it is you need to do. If you're drilling, that's the programming process. That's the assessing and the programming. Right? Figure out what your goal is for the next ball that you feed in for the drill. If it's a point, maybe it's just getting back to your primary tactic, right? Maybe it's reviewing what's going on a little bit. Obviously, between points, you don't have a ton of time here, but this is kind of your opportunity to review what's going on and then give yourself a very clear and simple intention for a focus for the next point and reprogram yourself there. The third R is a reset. Right? And that's where I like it's the second opportunity to take a deep breath, right? Slow down all those thoughts that you might have had in the review process. Be very observant and see what's going on in your body, and kind of reprogram and start to trust yourself, trust the body to executing whatever that clear intention is. And then the fourth and last R is the ritual, right? Bouncing the ball, blinking your eyes, tapping the racket, whatever it is that you do before a point, and that gets you right back on task and ready to go. So those are the 4 R's with the mindfulness principles there built in, using the breath as an anchor and really trying to practice non-judgment and just observing during that review process. So to wrap it all up, mindfulness applied to tennis, right? Don't like we've talked about a few times here already, don't think this is going to be a quick fix. You know, like Peter mentioned, you're not going to get this right away. Simply being aware when you are invoking judgment, right? Simply being aware when you're trying to control things that are out of your control. Simply being aware of when you're not being accepting of what's going on around you. That is the most important part, and that requires a softening, again, of the mind. Soften, don't try to control, right? Take a deep breath, step back, and just observe when it happens, right? And when that happens, you give yourself a little bit of headspace, and you allow yourself to come right back on task and focus on whatever it is that you want to focus on in that drill or in that point, right? And being very observant of those thoughts and those emotions that tend to creep up, right? And a lot of times too, we haven't talked about this yet, when we're able to objectively observe any sort of thoughts or feelings or emotions that come up, a lot of times we can pick up on some patterns, right? Some thought patterns that arise when you're playing. And that's something that you can take, certainly not at the time, but maybe after a match or after a practice session, you can review that. And that can be some very useful information as well. You can notice, well, when I get into this situation, I really find myself, getting fearful, right? Or getting nervous, or, gosh, I really found that once I progressed in the set, I had a high first serve percentage early on in the first set. And then as the tension started to build and I started to miss a couple more first serves, I really found myself getting emotional there. That's something that you can review in post-match and really be a little bit more perceptive of. And then you can try to be aware of that and try to improve that the next time out. So really being perceptive of those things is key. The most important, in my opinion, the most important way to start practicing mindfulness, not just in tennis, but in life, is to try meditation, right? Again, meditation is basically like bicep curls for your mind, right? Every time you practice mindfulness meditation, you're practicing all these principles in a very, it's like when we go out and we practice serves to a cone, right? We're target serving. It's a very isolated, it's an isolated drill. It's something where we can have a very clear and simple focus that then we can hone in and hone in and hone in, that we can then apply to a much bigger space, right? So when you practice meditation and when you practice simply just sitting there and being aware of the breath, and every time that you start to feel your mind go astray and you bring it back to the breath, right? That's it right there. That's the core principle. That's the key thing of mindfulness. When you can sit there and practice it in a very controlled, structured way, you can then to apply it to your tennis a little bit more. And so I want to encourage everybody to try a little bit of meditation. And at the end, if Peter would be so kind, I think we might practice a little 5-minute meditation at the end, just to give you a little taste of what it's like, right? And see see what you think. And if you want to start practicing it a little bit more, that would be great. So we'll get to that at the end if Peter will indulge us.
Sure.
Now I've kind of divided it up here. I want to just quickly get through how to apply it to players. And then also I know we've got a lot of coaches watching this as well. So how to apply your mindful tennis as a coach. So to wrap it up real quick here with players, taking the court with the principles of mindfulness in mind, the non-judgment, the acceptance, the relaxed concentration. The more that you can be aware of that stuff on court, the better. We've talked about that a lot. Staying disciplined with your rituals, right? Anytime we tend to get emotional out on court, anytime the pressure starts to ratchet up, those are times where we might tend to go away from our rituals. And that's the times where we really want to make sure that we stay disciplined with the rituals. So the rituals are key. Using your breath as an anchor for your game, as an anchor for your mindfulness, as an anchor for staying present in the moment. That's a huge thing. And then the mindful learning process, right? Observe, program, let it happen. And then using those images and feelings instead of words. Those are always, images and feelings are the language of the body, right? When we start to tell it things in words, now we're trying to speak to it in a foreign language, and a lot of times it's harder to apply. So using images and feelings as often as possible will help us make the improvements that we want in our game. Getting into it for coaches, right? Again, and by no means, these things are very important, and these things are things that I try to apply to my coaching. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm perfect. These are things that I focus on a daily basis too, and I'm continually trying to get better at. But I think if we can all try to be mindful of these things when we're giving lessons to players, I think it certainly helps to emphasize these principles. So the first thing, making sure you're observing and assessing your student and not judging your student, right? They might come out and tell you, oh, my forehand sucks. I want to get it better. I'm here because I have a bad serve, whatever it is. Try not to follow them down that rabbit hole. If I've always found that leading by example and leading by actions is most effective. If you can observe and assess their game, and that's the way for you to teach them how to observe and assess their game as opposed to judge their game. So I think that's really important there. Observe it for what it is, see what they're doing, and then help them reprogram themselves to to whatever it is that they're trying to improve. Another thing that I find that when I'm giving a lesson is, I'll come into it with a plan, right? And I think it's really important for us coaches to have a lesson plan when you go into it with a student. But don't become married to that plan, right? That's us trying to control the situation and control the player and control that hour or hour and a half or 2 hours, whatever you have with that player. Really be receptive in that moment of what your student needs. Maybe you go out and you have a clear plan for what you want to do, but they're on a different wavelength, right? They want to work on something else, or maybe they're just not receptive to whatever it is that you initially had planned that you wanted to give them that day. And instead of, when I find that I get too married to my lesson plan and don't change it and just get stubborn and say, hey, I know what's best and this is what they need to do, I'm fighting them for that whole lesson, and not a lot of progress is made. If I'm really observing and I'm really more receptive to my student, then I'm able to get through to them and maybe make more of an impact on them that day. So I think that's a really important principle to invoke. Being patient, obviously, mindful learning, we just touched on a little bit. And this is a really interesting thing from the inner game of tennis that I really that I've tried to practice is compliments are criticisms in disguise. They're judgments in disguise. So when I started out coaching, I knew that one of my most important values that I wanted to be super positive, right? I didn't want to be that guy that's, you want to be critical and you want to make sure you're letting players know if they're doing something wrong and giving them constructive criticism when they need. But when they're doing something good, yes, man, that's it. Good job, great shot, all that kind of stuff, right? And as I've studied this mindfulness a little bit more and I've been observant in my lessons, and as I'm starting to kind of hone my coaching craft, I've often found that the more positive that I am, it's almost counterproductive, because those compliments are just criticisms in disguise, right? When I'm telling them, oh, that's a great shot. You did that really good there. Now you've established a good or bad value to whatever they're doing. So if they don't do that, well, now it's bad, right? Now they're doing things wrong, right? And so I think it's important to be encouraging. I think it's important to be positive, certainly, but don't be just dishing out compliments and dishing out positivity all the time. Use it selectively, right? Then it's also more effective if you can kind of save those really positive things that you say, for when I hate to say when they're really deserved, but I don't know. Does that kind of make sense there, Peter? I think that, being overly positive kind of, it leads our students to tend to be even more critical because they want to know if they're doing things good or bad the whole time. Does that kind of make sense?
It does make sense. It's something that I wrestle with a lot. I definitely understand what you're saying, and a large part of me agrees. But I know I can tend to be that way, and I also watch Rick Macy just coach down in Florida, and he's always so. Yeah, it's interesting. I definitely think it works for sure what you're saying. And sometimes, if you are giving compliments all the time, and then all of a sudden your student hits a good shot or a bad shot, they're probably thinking, well, did he not like that? He didn't say anything. So it's something that I think I need to be more mindful of. So it definitely gets me thinking too. So that's good stuff.
Yeah, I think it's just being, go ahead and just kind of use it as a test, right? Be aware of it the next time we step out on court as coaches and see, and players too, right? If you're sitting there in the warm up and you're going, oh, I'm playing well today, I'm playing bad today, right? That's all, even if you tell yourself you're playing well, that means there's a flip side to that. That means you're playing poorly, right? So, maybe this works for you, maybe it doesn't. Observe and maybe test yourself in one of your lessons and see, well, I'm maybe going to be a little bit more selective with my compliments and see if it works better, see if it works worse, So I think it's a good little experiment we can all try. And I thought it was kind of clever when I came across that in the book. So the most kind of most fundamental practice of mindfulness is with a meditation. And, meditation practices, they take time to establish if you're just getting started on it. But I would encourage everyone, if this is something that you really want to start taking seriously and implementing in your game, I think a simple 5-minute practice a day of meditation is a great start. And again, it's like bicep curls for your brain. It's like target serving for your serve. It's an ability to isolate that skill and really hone in and practice it. And that way you can a little easier apply it to your game when you step out on court, and hopefully apply it to your life also in general. So, okay. So if everyone will indulge me, we'll just get into a real quick meditation, a little sample here, see if you guys like it. And first, I just kind of want everyone to start out. You can start with your eyes open and just kind of a nice soft gaze in front of you, not staring at anything in particular. And we'll just start with a couple real nice, big, deep breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth. And once you take a couple deep breaths here, you can close the eyes. Let your breathing return to normal. And simply become present with your breath. Become really perceptive of it. Feel the air kind of right at the front of your nose. Feel it go in and out of your nose. You can feel the air come into your lungs. Feel your body soften on the exhale. And just taking a couple minutes here to really connect with your breath. Be mindful of it. And see what it does to your body. And on your next exhale, you can start to open your eyes and feel, be perceptive. Do you feel any different? Did that help relax you? Did that help soften you? And again, hopefully that's something that you can take there. And if that's a feeling that you like, or if that's something that you want to start practicing, again, I'd encourage everybody to try a 5-minute meditation. An app that I really love, and a company that I really love, is a company called Headspace. They make meditation very accessible for everyone. I don't have an affiliation with them. This is just a personal, I really stand behind them. I think it's a great app to check out. It's called Headspace. It's a great way to introduce yourself to meditation. And if you're at all interested, please check it out.
All right, very cool. Yeah, that actually did relax me. That felt good. Because as I'm running the presentation, I'm aware of everything as far as what you're saying, and if I should say something, if I shouldn't say something. So it was nice for me to kind of just relax there for a minute. And one thing I noticed is most of my body was able to relax, but for some reason this I noticed got like heavy and tight, and so so I guess this is where I hold a lot of my tension, right here, which was interesting, because that was the one body part that didn't relax, almost like got worse. So pretty interesting. That's
perfect. That's exactly it.
Yeah. So that was a great presentation. I know a lot of people would go to go through exactly what you did today, and they would pay some big bucks. So I mean, that was really, really, I'm grateful that you spent all this time with us and went through this with us today. So below this, I think we're going to go off to the side of the video for which will be your bio and link. Is there anywhere where you'd like to send them? Would you like to send them to a T-shirt? Where would you like to send everybody today, if anywhere?
Yeah, well, first, yeah, I'd love to encourage everybody to check out Animus Tennis. AnimusTennis.com is our website. Our T-shirts are a premium blend we're 100% organic, and it's bamboo and organic cotton. So, Peter, as you talked about kind of on the intro, the bamboo's kind of got a different, a softer feel. It's hypoallergenic, so it's really easy on the skin. And so kind of now that I've gotten used to wearing bamboo shirts, now I've got bamboo bed sheets. I kind of can't get away from this stuff. So I would encourage you to try it. And then the second element of our shirts is we wanted to design works of art. So every design that's on our shirts is hand sketched by our artist that works for us. And she's an incredible artist. And so we kind of wanted to celebrate our love for tennis with some cool pieces of art on a really nice premium shirt. So I'd encourage everybody to check that out, animustennis.com. And if you've been listening to this, we're going to have a discount code. Everyone can apply on the website. If you type in TennisCon, one word, TennisCon, you'll be able to get 20% off of your shirt. So that's a nice offer there for anyone that's involved here with the video. So please check that out, animustennis.com. You can also check out on my Instagram. It's Andy Gerst Tennis. I'll start be doing a little bit more tennis stuff there, and that's a good way to kind of stay up to date with what I'm doing. And then lastly, I have a podcast called Everything About Tennis. And that can be linked. You'll find that on my Instagram page as well. But that's hosted right now on SoundCloud. So soundcloud.com/everythingaboutennis. And the podcast is what it sounds like. It's getting geeked out on everything that has to do with tennis, from nutrition to coaching philosophies to pro tour stories to all kinds of stuff. So if you're interested in the podcast, it's called Everything About Tennis.
That's awesome stuff. And guys, definitely get yourself a shirt because they are super comfortable. And I just want to thank Andy for making this presentation. I want to thank you, the tennis player, for watching today, because this is super valuable stuff. I really do feel that we are building the ultimate training library within TennisCon. And if you're on this page right now and you're watching it for free, I do want you to pay attention to the timer at the bottom of this page, because one thing that I'm going to do, because every time I have a new presentation come up with another outstanding, talented coach, is I always think, man, I need to be practicing this. Certainly the meditation and so many things that you've said, I know I could get better on the court. So one thing we're doing to make TennisCon, better, bigger, and more powerful than last year is I'm going to be going through this stuff the next 30 days, because I know that when you get just inundated with so much great information, it can be hard to, first of all, watch it all, and then second of all, to be able to really practice it. You might watch it, but then you don't get to practice it. So after TennisCon, about a week after TennisCon, we're going to do a 30-day TennisCon 2 challenge, where I'm going to be going through the Ultimate Training Library with you and be going on live on our group page that we've created. We'll also put it in the membership if you don't want to go on Facebook, because I know a lot of people don't want to go on Facebook. A lot of people do. Most people do. So either way, you'll get access to it. And I'm going to go through the training with you guys. So, you get access to this for free until the timer runs out. But if you do want to really take advantage and make sure that you're just not watching these videos, but actually like helping them get you better, I encourage you to join me in the 30-day TennisCon 2 challenge, because I know if I'm going to go through this training step by step, it's definitely going to make me a better coach and a better player. I'll probably even get in better shape. So that's what it's all about, guys. So thanks so much, Andy. And it was really awesome getting to know you, and I really appreciate what you did for us today.
Likewise, Peter. Really, thanks for having me on. And I think that's awesome that you're going to be going through that with the 30-day challenge. I really think that's great. So, yeah, I'm honored to be a part of this great event, and thanks for having me.